Amelia Vespera moved to the quiet town of Blackthorn, seeking a fresh start. After years of the city's relentless pace, she craved the stillness that this rural community promised. Blackthorn was a sleepy, isolated place nestled between dense woods and rolling hills. The townspeople were polite but distant, going about their daily routines with a rhythm that seemed rehearsed over generations. Amelia found the tranquility both calming and unsettling, but she brushed it off as part of adapting to her new life. Her house, an old, creaky cottage on the edge of town, was everything she'd hoped for, quaint and removed from the noise of the world. And yet it was the woods behind her home that captured her curiosity. Blackthorn's forest stretched for miles, dark and thick, and as the days passed, Amelia couldn't help but feel drawn to it, though something about it felt off. The locals often exchanged wary glances when she mentioned it, and despite her attempts to dig deeper, no one would speak much of what lay beyond the trees. One evening, while unpacking in the kitchen, Amelia noticed a group of townspeople walking past her window, heading toward the woods. She hadn't seen much foot traffic since moving in, especially not at night. Cloaked figures, moving silently with their faces hidden in the shadows. They carried lanterns, their light flickering like fireflies disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Curiosity gnawed at her, and though every rational instinct told her to stay inside, she couldn't resist. Grabbing her coat, she slipped out the back door and followed them. The cool night air stung her cheeks as she crept along the narrow path that wound into the heart of the woods. The further she went, the thicker the trees became, suffocating the moonlight and cloaking her in darkness. The only sounds were her footsteps and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. After what felt like an eternity, she came upon a clearing. There, the townspeople had gathered in a circle, their lanterns casting eerie shadows. They chanted in low, guttural tones, their voices rising and falling in a haunting rhythm. At the center of the circle was a stone altar, old and worn, with strange symbols etched into its surface. The figure stood at the altar, taller and more commanding than the rest, wearing a cloak that shimmered in the lantern light. Amelia's heart pounded as she watched, frozen in place. She couldn't hear the words, but their meaning felt unmistakable. This was no innocent gathering. From that night on, Amelia's world began to unravel. At first, it was subtle, faint whispers in her ear when she was alone, fleeting shadows darting at the edges of her vision. She tried to dismiss it as paranoia, the remnants of an overactive imagination fueled by what she had witnessed in the woods. But soon, the terror became impossible to ignore. Night after night, she woke to the sound of chanting outside her window, echoing through the empty streets of Blackthorn. Her dreams were filled with visions of the stone altar, blood running down its sides, and faces of the townspeople, expressionless and hollow. During the day, strange markings began to appear on her skin, symbols like the ones she had seen on the altar, etched in pale white across her arms. It wasn't long before the cult's leader appeared. He came to her house, knocking softly, though the dread his presence stirred in her felt like a thunderous roar. His face was shrouded by a hood, his eyes barely visible under the cloak. He spoke in a voice that felt more like a growl than human speech. "You've seen too much, Amelia," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You are one of us now. The circle has chosen you." Amelia tried to leave Blackthorn the next morning. She packed her bags and drove toward the highway, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. But no matter which direction she took, the road twisted and turned, always leading her back to the town. The woods seemed to close in on her, their trees standing like silent sentinels, guiding her back into the town's cursed grip. Desperation set in. She tried calling friends, but her phone no longer worked. The town was a prison, and she was trapped within its borders. The chants grew louder every night, and with each passing day, the symbols on her arms spread, glowing faintly under the moonlight. It was then she realized there was no escaping the midnight circle. They had chosen her, and their grip on her life was tightening. But Amelia wasn't ready to give in. She began researching the town's history, combing through old records and forgotten archives. She learned that Blackthorn had been home to the cult for centuries, a dark force that sustained itself through sacrifices new blood brought into their fold every generation. The only way out was through them. As the full moon approached, the town prepared for their final ritual. Amelia knew it was her last chance to break free. She returned to the clearing in the woods, armed with the knowledge she had uncovered. There the cult gathered, their cloaked figures standing in eerie silence, waiting for her. The leader stepped forward, his eyes glinting beneath his hood. "You belong to us now," he whispered. "The Midnight Circle cannot be broken." Amelia took a deep breath and faced them, her fear giving way to anger. She had spent weeks unraveling the cult's power, and she had discovered the key to ending their control. The altar said it was the source of their strength, the ancient stone that had bound the town to its dark past. With a swift motion, she pulled a vial from her coat, a mixture of herbs and oil she had painstakingly prepared from old rituals she'd uncovered. She smashed it against the stone, watching as it sizzled and cracked. The chanting stopped. The townspeople, once hypnotized, stared in confusion. The leader's eyes widened in horror as the altar crumbled, its power dissolving into the earth. The grip the Midnight Circle had on Blackthorn loosened, and Amelia felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She walked away from the clearing, leaving the shattered cult behind. The forest no longer felt menacing. The road out of town stretched before her, open and free. Amelia never looked back. She left Blackthorn the next day, the scars on her arms fading as the town disappeared in her rearview mirror. The Midnight Circle was broken, and its hold over her life shattered. Yet deep in the woods, where the altar once stood, whispers still lingered in the wind. Some secrets are never truly buried, but Amelia had won her freedom for now. Moving to Saltbrook, a small coastal town, felt like a fresh start. I was searching for a new beginning, and the town's quiet charm had drawn me in. But it wasn't long before I realized there was something off about the place. The locals were friendly but distant. They spoke in hushed tones, and there were stories, whispers of a strange ritual performed once every decade under the blood moon. I thought it was just old folklore until I saw how seriously they took it. One night at the local bar, I overheard two elderly men discussing the offering and the chosen one. Their voices dropped as they noticed me listening. I brushed it off at first, but when the blood moon was mentioned again by my landlady, Mrs. Henderson, I couldn't ignore it. There was something more to these tales, something dark lurking just beneath the surface of Saltbrook. The blood moon was due to rise in less than a week, and the whole town seemed to be preparing for it. That's when the fear began creeping in. The nights grew colder and strange things started happening. I'd hear whispers at night, faint voices chanting in a language I didn't understand. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, and I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. I knew it had to be connected to the blood moon and the ritual. One afternoon, while walking through the market, I felt a hand grab my wrist. Startled, I turned to see an old woman with wild, unblinking eyes. "You've been marked," she whispered, her voice shaky. "They will come for you." But before I could respond, she disappeared into the crowd. My pulse quickened. What did she mean? The following night, I dreamt of a circle of hooded figures, their eyes glowing red under the light of the blood moon. They were chanting, reaching out toward me. When I woke, my body was covered in cold sweat, and a symbol, an intricate, winding mark had appeared on my wrist. Panic set in. I tried scrubbing the mark off, but it wouldn't fade. Desperate, I went to the local library to research the town's history. Hidden deep within the dusty shelves, I found an old book detailing a cult that performed sacrifices under the blood moon. The ritual was designed to seal a pact, ensuring prosperity for Saltbrook in exchange for one life, an offering made once every decade. And now it seemed I had been chosen. As the blood moon drew nearer, the atmosphere in Saltbrook became unbearable. The townspeople stopped speaking to me, their eyes filled with an eerie, knowing gaze. It was as if they all knew I was destined to be the next offering. I spent my nights barricaded inside my house, but the whispers grew louder. They called my name, urging me to surrender. The mark on my wrist burned, a constant reminder of my fate. Each day, I felt the walls closing in, the town shrinking, as if there was no escape. The night of the blood moon finally arrived. The sky turned an unnatural crimson, casting an eerie glow over everything. From my window, I saw the townspeople gathering at the cliffs, dressed in dark robes. Their chanting echoed through the still night air, growing louder, more ominous. My heart raced as the mark on my wrist pulsed in time with the ritual. I knew I had to do something, If I didn't stop the ritual, I wouldn't survive the night. Armed with only my fear and desperation, I ran toward the cliffs. The chants grew louder as I approached, the rhythmic beat of the blood moon pulsing above me. The cult members, faceless under their dark hoods, stood in a perfect circle, swaying in unison. At the center of the circle was the altar, its surface slick with the blood of past sacrifices. As I approached, I saw him, the cult leader, standing tall and ominous. His eyes were hollow, glowing with a faint, unnatural light. He extended a hand toward me. "It is time, Rachel. You cannot escape your fate." But I refused to be their victim. I had uncovered a crucial detail in the book. If the altar was destroyed before the ritual was complete, the pact could be broken. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed a rock and sprinted toward the altar. The cult leader's voice rose to a fever pitch as I reached it. His outstretched hands missed me by inches as I brought the rock crashing down onto the stone slab. The altar shattered with a thunderous crack, and the cult members recoiled, screaming as the blood moon flickered in the sky. And the earth beneath us trembled, and I watched in horror as the cult leader's form began to fade. His hollow eyes, once so powerful, dimmed before he vanished completely. The red light of the blood moon slowly ebbed, and the eerie silence of Saltbrook returned. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. My entire body ached, and my mind struggled to process what had just happened. The cult was gone, their presence wiped out as if they had never existed. The altar, once the center of the dark ritual, was now nothing but rubble scattered across the cliffs. I had stopped the ritual, broken the curse that had gripped Saltbrook for decades. But as I stood there looking at the ruined altar under the softening light of dawn, a deep sense of unease crept in. The whispers that had haunted me for weeks were quieter, but they hadn't disappeared completely. Something still lingered in the air, a dark presence that refused to be fully extinguished. The town, once lively, was now eerily empty. The people had disappeared, vanished overnight, leaving only their empty homes and vacant streets behind. It was as though the entire town had been erased, leaving me as the sole witness to its dark past. I wandered through Saltbrook, searching for any sign of life, but found none. The pier, the streets all deserted. It was as if the town had died with the ritual, its very soul consumed by the dark forces that had once ruled it. I left Saltbrook behind, walking until I could no longer see the cliffs or feel the weight of the blood moon on my shoulders. But even now, far away from the cursed town, I still feel its presence. At night, when the moon is full, I sometimes hear faint whispers calling my name. I escaped the ritual, but I can't escape the knowledge that the blood moon will rise again. And when it does, another town, another soul, will face the terror of the Midnight Circle. "Are you guys really going to chicken out?" Ethan's voice echoed in the dimly lit cafe, where the three of us, Tara, Liam, and I, were huddled around a table, nervously sipping our drinks. It was late November, and the autumn wind howled outside, sending shivers down my spine. We were in our final semester of college, and the idea of exploring the abandoned St. Augustine Church had begun as a thrilling dare among friends. But now, with the sun setting and the shadows creeping in, it felt like a terrible mistake. Tara, always the adventurous one, leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "It'll be fun. Besides, it's just an old church. What's the worst that could happen?" Liam, who had been quiet, finally spoke up, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "You've heard the stories, right? About the cult that used to meet there. People say they vanished without a trace." That did little to quell my anxiety. The church had been abandoned for decades, its walls crumbling and covered in overgrown vines. Whispers of a notorious cult that had once thrived there, performing dark rituals and making sacrifices, sent chills down my spine. Yet something about the prospect of discovery drew us in. I sighed, glancing at my friends. "All right, but let's stick together. No wandering off." As we approached the church, its silhouette loomed against the night sky, like a watchful giant. The heavy wooden door creaked ominously as we pushed it open, revealing an interior swallowed by shadows. Moonlight filtered through the broken stained glass, casting eerie patterns on the stone floor. My heart raced as I stepped inside, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Look at this," Tara exclaimed, shining her flashlight on the walls. Disturbing symbols were etched into the stone, a mix of pagan icons and cryptic runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "What do you think they mean?" Liam whispered, stepping closer. I felt an inexplicable chill as I traced one of the symbols with my finger. It was like touching something alive, and I quickly pulled my hand back, trying to shake off the feeling. As we ventured deeper, we stumbled upon a small room filled with strange artifacts, old robes, candles, and an altar stained darkly, remnants of the rituals performed long ago. A sense of foreboding hung thick in the air. "We shouldn't be here," I muttered, glancing back toward the entrance. But Tara was already pulling out her phone, snapping pictures. "This is going to make an incredible story for our project." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the church, followed by an unsettling silence. We exchanged nervous glances, and Ethan's bravado wavered. "Did you hear that?" "Maybe we should leave," he suggested, but Tara's eyes sparkled with excitement. "No way. Let's check it out." Against my better judgment, we crept towards the source of the noise. Each step felt heavier, the air growing thicker. As we turned the corner, we found a hidden staircase leading down into darkness. He hesitated, but Tara grabbed my hand, urging me onward. "What if there's something down there?" she whispered, her eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and excitement. And as we descended the stairs, I felt the temperature drop. The musty scent of decay filled my nostrils. At the bottom, we entered a dimly lit chamber adorned with more disturbing symbols. And then we noticed that Liam was gone. "Liam?" Tara called out, her voice echoing in the silence. Panic washed over us as we searched the room, calling his name, but there was no response. Suddenly, I heard faint whispers, echoing from the darkness. They felt like hands reaching out to grab hold of my sanity. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, but as I turned, the doorway we had entered through vanished, replaced by a solid stone wall. "What the hell?" Ethan exclaimed, his voice shaky. Tara's face went pale, and I felt a growing sense of dread settle in my stomach. "We have to find Liam," Tara cried, her eyes wide with fear. But as we began to search for another way out, the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices echoing through the chamber. Join us," they chanted, chilling my bones. I tried to ignore them, focusing on finding Liam, but the sensation of being watched intensified like invisible eyes boring into my back. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, cloaked silhouette that sent a jolt of terror through my body. The figure lifted its hood, revealing a face twisted with malice, its eyes glimmering with a malevolent hunger. "You have come to join the chosen ones," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Your friend has already accepted his fate." "Where's Liam?" I shouted, desperation rising in my throat. "What have you done to him?" The cult leader only smiled, revealing sharp teeth. "He has been marked. Soon you will join him." I felt my heart race, panic bubbling to the surface. "No, we're leaving." I grabbed Tara's hand, and we dashed toward the far wall, searching for any sign of an exit. The whispers grew deafening, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. So in the chaos, we stumbled upon a hidden passageway concealed behind a tattered tapestry. Without thinking, we plunged into the darkness, our footsteps echoing in the narrow tunnel. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of our frantic breaths. "We have to keep moving," I urged, pulling Tara forward. As we navigated the twists and turns of the passage, I felt a surge of determination. We wouldn't let them claim us. Just as we were about to lose hope, we spotted a faint light ahead. "There!" Tara exclaimed, and we sprinted towards it. Bursting through the exit, we found ourselves back in the church, but everything was different. The atmosphere was lighter, the oppressive darkness lifted. We rushed toward the door, pushing it open and tumbling outside into the cool night air. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of the streetlights, gasping for breath. The sun rose, casting warm light over Saltbrook, but the warmth did little to ease my heart. "We need to call the police about Liam," Tara said, her voice trembling. I nodded, but deep down, I feared what we might find. Days turned into weeks, and despite our efforts, Liam was never found. The church was boarded up, the townsfolk pretending it didn't exist. Rumors of strange sightings and whispers continued, but I knew the truth. There were forces at work that we couldn't understand. As for Tara and me, we returned to our lives, but the scars of that night remained. I often found myself staring at my reflection, half expecting to see Liam's face staring back at me. The experience had changed us, woven into our souls, leaving us forever haunted by the darkness we encountered. Years later, I would think back to that night, the whisper still echoing in my mind. I often wondered what had become of the chosen ones, and if the cult still lingered in the shadows, waiting for new initiates to join their ranks. We had escaped, but the darkness never truly left us. We had seen the evil that thrived in the abandoned church, and we knew it would always be watching, waiting for the next chance to claim its chosen ones.